When we think of World War I, the images that come to mind are often of trench warfare, barbed wire, and the tragic loss of millions. But what led to the outbreak of one of the deadliest conflicts in human history? The causes of World War I are far more complex and hidden beneath the surface than most of us realize. Many of us were taught that the immediate trigger for World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in June 1914. While this event lit the fuse, the powder keg had been building for decades. Let's explore the less obvious factors that set the stage for the Great War. First, let's talk about alliances, a web of commitments that entangled nearly every major power in Europe. The early 20th century was a time when nations sought security through alliances. But instead of providing stability, these agreements created a domino effect. When one nation was threatened, its allies were pulled into the conflict, leading to a full-scale war. Next, consider the role of nationalism. Across Europe, intense national pride was on the rise, particularly in regions like the Balkans. Ethnic groups under foreign rule yearned for independence, and nations competed for dominance. Nationalism fueled rivalries and created an atmosphere of mistrust and competition, making diplomatic solutions harder to achieve. Another factor was the dangerous arms race, a buildup of military might that was unprecedented. The great powers of Europe were amassing armies and navies in a show of strength. This militarism didn't just prepare nations for war, it made war more likely by encouraging the belief that military force was the ultimate solution to disputes. Then there's imperialism. European powers had spent the previous century expanding their empires across the globe, colonizing vast territories in Africa, Asia, and beyond. But this scramble for empire led to conflicts over territories and resources. The competition for global dominance created tensions that extended far beyond Europe. And within the borders of these nations, social and economic factors played their part. The rapid industrialization of Europe brought prosperity but also inequality and unrest. Labor strikes, class struggles, and the fear of socialist revolutions made governments more inclined to unify their populations through nationalism and war. Finally, consider the failures of diplomacy. The early 20th century was a time of complex diplomacy, but it was also a time when leaders were often more concerned with their national interests than with maintaining peace. Miscommunications, miscalculations, and a general underestimation of the potential for disaster contributed to the breakdown of diplomacy. So, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, it was the spark that ignited a much larger fire. The assassination was a catalyst, but the war that followed was the result of deep-rooted issues, alliances that bound nations together, nationalism that drove them apart, militarism that armed them to the teeth, imperialism that bred rivalry, and a diplomatic system that failed when it was needed most. The Great War, as it was known then, was not inevitable, but it was the product of forces that had been in motion for decades. Understanding these hidden causes helps us grasp not just the origins of World War I, but the complex and often fragile nature of international relations. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. If you want to explore more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Until next time, remember, history is not just about what happened, it's about why it happened.